The implications of the Epic versus Apple lawsuit decision. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by Insta360 and their new Insta360 X5 flagship camera. Visit store.insta360.com and use the promo code MacVoices to get a free invisible 114 centimeter selfie stick worth $24.99 with a standard package purchase. Limit first 30 standard package purchases only. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is MacVoices Live. As if you didn't know it, we're live on YouTube at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV. A bunch of our friends are already in the chat room. We expect more momentarily. We have a lot to get through tonight. The last couple of weeks have been sort of short on things we wanted to discuss, but this week, man, we're overflowing. So let's find out who's here, and then we are going to get to it. David Ginsburg, top left of my screen in his usual perch. Dave, good to see you.
Good to see you as well, and everybody else. Glad to be here. Hope got some good conversation coming up here.
Good. Dave, do you have an endorsement deal with Nike since you're wearing their shirt?
I don't.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's a nice shirt, actually.
Too bad. Marty Jencius, good to see you up in the top right of my screen. How are things where you are, and how is your button?
My button?
Your button?
Oh, my button's fine. The press button, yeah, I haven't made as much cash off of it as I hope to, so I'm going to try and keep it on for a couple more weeks. Getting a quarter from everybody who wants to push it. But I've got the Nike gear on too, the endorsement.
Oh, you do? I think your shirt was just wrinkled so that I couldn't see it or didn't recognize it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, gee. I don't have any endorsements.
You didn't get the endorsement. You didn't get the endorsement.
Nothing. I'm eating beans.
We're both endorsing.
Steak.
I probably should be like the shows. They make you put tape over it. So
Yeah, really. Mark Fuccio has joined us. Mark, we've missed you. You've been gone for a little while, and I know at least one of the stories on the screen behind you, but what are the other two?
Oh, all of them surround either Sweeney or the Epic Apple court case. So I can elaborate more fully if we get to those stories, because you gave us a really packed agenda tonight.
Yeah, we're probably not going to get to everything, but hey, we do our best. Last but absolutely not least, this time with no flower, but with a bird. I guess it's a bird. Eric Bolden, good to see you.
Good evening. Today, we have the great egret. I like to think great and powerful, and then I can call it Oz, but just the great egret.
Is there a normal egret versus a great egret?
Oh, with this one, you have no egrets.
Oh. Saw that one coming.
I didn't see it coming. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry for those of you listening, live and later. Yeah, thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Rim shot. That's nice.
The rest of the evening will be so much better.
Can't get any worse.
I thought it was a funny fitting with the rim shot.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Man. Well, let's get to it. There's one big story that's going on right now, and we talked a little bit about it ahead of time, and I don't want to spend the whole show about it, or even a substantial portion, simply because it's been hashed and rehashed and re-rehashed. But I would definitely am interested in everyone's thoughts here on an abbreviated basis about the Judge Gonzalez's ruling about Apple not obeying her previous orders and giving access to alternate payment systems for the App Store. She came down on them pretty hard. I just threw one article in our respective chat rooms. There's one other one I want to throw where she basically accused an Apple executive of lying under oath, which that's a little bigger deal than just an admonishment by the court for, not allegedly not following, but what she thought they should be doing or what she thought she said. So with that, Who wants to start? Because this one, I know everybody has thoughts on this one. Marty, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. The story's changed from the whole idea of the court influencing business decisions in private business companies to the fact that Apple did some dodgy stuff in the process of trying to avoid it. I think Apple was on the winning side, probably still will be at some point, but the whole conversation has changed to is this Apple employee in contempt of court? Why are they delaying this? She's gotten much more vitriolic with her responses to Apple and insistence on them following her court orders. Changed the whole dialogue around what the real issue is, which is courts and external entities influencing Apple's decisions around how they want to run their business.
Marty, or excuse me, sorry, Mark, I see you're shaking your head.
Right.
So don't you shake your head?
Okay, so I think I think a lot of this is a self-inflicted wound, and I look for you. I'll just make some summary comments because I want to follow your guidance of not to consume the whole episode with it. But basically, after this came out, I reread her original sort of 180 page judgment, and a lot of time in that was spent on the amount of the 30% and where was that coming from. And sort of at the end of that, she didn't say that no, you could not charge. She just said, what you're charging is way too high, and there's long analysis, right or wrong, but there's analysis of witnesses from both sides about that. And her ruling was this is excessive. You need to either come back, with a more reasonable fee or justify where it is. And they did nothing. Basically they came out and as she says in the most recent opinion, they looked at a number of options and they took the worst, most restrictive, elements of each option and rolled it together and ruled it out. So that's why she's come down so hard on them. And basically this, I think, the fact that her ruling was you can't charge anybody anything. I think that's an own goal. That's a self-inflicted wound. That's something, Apple just did to itself. Reading the decision, it just seems that, the amount of hubris and arrogance that's brewing inside of Cupertino is, we need to bring out the leeches and stop it, because it just seems really atrocious. And that's part of what she came down on. And because she reiterated in this decision, so like she did the last one, is that, that courts are not, set up to tell businesses how to run their business. They're set up to tell them how they can operate within the framework of the law. And I think on this, Apple botched it. I mean, it's clear. I think we were talking about it, a year and a half ago when they came out with a 27%, and we all laughed and giggled. And I know I was in favor of that, saying, okay, at that rate, nobody's going to do anything because, it's not worth changing, and that's clearly what happened. And that's what she came down on them. So, it's hardly for, on the issue of perjury, I think that's very, very serious, and we'll have to see how that unfolds. Everybody is innocent until proven guilty, but the fact that she, extracted testimony that seems to catch this individual, telling a lie, I think is pretty serious. So you will have to see what happens.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I threw a number of links into both chat rooms so that you could take a look and keep things in mind. And also, one of those links is that the App Store is 22 years old, which factors a little bit into my thinking, and also a comment that was made in the chat room, but I'm going to save that. I also, while Mark was talking, we were joined by two more panel members. Jim Ray, good to see you as always. Glad you were able to make it. And Mr. Jeff Gamet has appeared as well. Good to have you, Jeff.
It's great to be here, and I'm so happy to see everyone.
Yeah.
Likewise, Jeff.
Jeff, you might not be on the right mic. I'm not quite sure.
Well, I can fix that.
Okay, I knew you could. Jim, are you on the right mic?
I have no idea.
Yes, you are. Okay. Just checking. Just checking. While Jeff is fixing his mic, Dave?
Yeah, I was reading previous that Apple did comply to some of this, where they've changed they did update the App Store guidelines. So they're not allowing developers to steer users to external payment options. Did they not? Because I thought I saw that on Verge article related to that. That was a couple days ago. Unless I'm missing something that I didn't see here.
Yeah, no, I think after the ruling, Apple kind of, because the order contained something that they have to abide by the order, this new order as written, even while appealing, they just went ahead and complied with the order.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But yeah.
But the contempt part of it, yeah, that I just to add into Mark's comment that is it's pretty serious if that's the case. But like he said, innocent until proven guilty here.
Yeah. Eric?
They should have listened to Phil Schiller.
Yes.
Maybe it's too late now, but maybe he'll get a chance to kind of have input going forward. With all of this, I guess I'm going to just have to buy a bunch of stuff because I really want to know what happens with purchases and refunds if you're not happy. And that was always the thing that I was unsure of. But since nobody really did anything, because it wasn't worth it, there wasn't a way to kind of check that. That was always my big reasoning for liking paying through with the Apple system, is if something went wrong, you had only one spot to go to appeal or attempt to get credits back. But yes, Phil Schiller.
Okay. Jim, I'm sort of taking you guys as in the order you came in. Jim says his camera's not working. Yeah, you're right. Either that or you're meditating, Jim. I'm not sure which.
I think it's the camera.
Okay.
But I guess I could talk. It's an audio
please.
thing anyway, right?
Yeah.
It remains to be seen what the fallout of this is. They changed the rules only in the United States. It's unclear whether this applies to anything other than sales of content. Like Spotify has changed their app, and Patreon, I guess is, and Amazon, but I haven't heard about any software. As far as I know, like before this, Apple's rules were okay. You can sell content through an external payment system, but you got to pay the 27%. But I don't think you could sell software that way. At any rate, I haven't seen anyone doing this yet. So I think Apple is going to continue to drag their feet, kick and scream. I guess maybe there's a little bit of a change in that Spotify and Patreon have been able to change their model, but I'm very skeptical that this is going to change the overall, software market. I don't think it's going to change. And I don't think that, from what I've seen, most developers are sort of like, well, let's wait and see for 6 months and, let somebody else be the guinea pig. You still got to run your app through App Store review. If Apple doesn't like what you're doing, then they have all kinds of other mechanisms to, like drag their feet on approving, releases and stuff that, it's going to be difficult to prove, why they're doing that. It does seem to me like, I'm kind of shocked that they, they've been involved in court cases for quite a while. You'd think they would be more careful about writing things down. As far as, I think Mark was talking about Apple having all this hubris. Yeah, that's not a news flash. I think, certainly anybody in the developer community, nothing that this judge said was surprising, or, it was just sort of like, yeah, duh. So it remains to be seen. Certainly, like they could have changed the rules worldwide. They're like, nope, we're going to change it only in the United States, which is also, they're trying to, make an incentive to developers not to do this, because now that means, they're still dragging their feet, because if you're selling worldwide, which most people are, then now you've got to have two systems, the United States system and the rest of the world system. So, a lot of people are just going to be like, yeah, I'll just wait and see before I go to a bunch of effort to change the system. And you notice, at least as far as 2 or 3 hours ago, I haven't checked right before the show, Fortnite's not back in the store. Not sure why Tim Sweeney thinks it's going to be. Judge didn't say anything about that. Apple's still got the right to kick anybody out of the store. And, they've definitely shown that they won't hesitate to do that.
Today's MacVoices is supported by Insta360 and their new Insta360 X5 flagship camera. Visit store.insta360.com and use the promo code MacVoices to get a free invisible 114cm selfie stick worth $24.99 with a standard package purchase. Limit first 30 standard package purchases only. Insta360's powerful new flagship camera, the Insta360 X5, is the go-to tool for creators who want unmatched flexibility and image quality in a compact form factor, giving you total freedom to reframe, edit, and direct your shot after you've captured it. And who hasn't changed their minds after they shot a scene? It's like filming with multiple cameras at once and picking your perfect angle later. Whether you're creating content for YouTube, TikTok, or professional platforms, the level of control is a game changer. One of the X5's most impressive features is its live streaming capability. You can broadcast 360-degree content in real time to platforms like YouTube and Facebook, giving your audience an immersive, interactive experience. Whether you're streaming an event, a product launch, or just sharing an adventure, the X5 helps you stand out with smooth, stabilized footage and full spatial perspective, all from a device that fits in your hand. Right now, when you purchase a standard X5 package at store.insta360.com, you'll receive a free 114cm invisible selfie stick, a $24.99 value. Just use the promo code MacVoices at checkout. But don't wait, this offer is limited to the first 30 purchases only. Level up your content creation and streaming game at store.insta360.com with the Insta360 X5. Thanks to Insta360 for supporting MacVoices. Mark, you want to follow up, and then I want to get to Jeff.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Jim just said. I would look at it from a slightly different perspective, that when he says a lot won't change, I think that I think the ones that will change are things that we've seen, right? Like Spotify, that, who's been anxious for this, for a long time, and probably is ready for it, because of what they've been able to, do in terms of goings on in the EU. So they're ready, just cut and paste, do the same thing in the US. So I think probably the larger developers, will be the ones who will change, because for them, they have probably a much stronger financial incentive than than medium or
But
small size developers.
Spotify's not selling software; they're selling content.
I know, but it's
So
still,
everybody that we've seen is content sales,
right.
not selling software.
But still, that's my point is that Spotify has a big incentive for trying to have their own in-app purchase, so they don't have to pay anything to Apple past past their base I guess their new technology fees that there are due for distributing their apps through the various Apple app stores. So I think that again, going back to reading the original decision, I think sort of Apple's under attack for this all over the world. I think maybe they clearly misread what the vehemence against them. And in this case, had they come out and said, okay, well, we'll lower it from 30 to 20%, or maybe made everybody 15%, which is what they do for some things after you hit a 1 year milestone. I think they could have avoided this. But I think coming out with this snickering, well, 3%, which does not even allow people to recoup their credit card, that was a stick in the eye of the judge, and they got whacked badly for it. I
think Apple thinks they're going to get it reversed.
Of course they do. That's why they're appealing. I don't know that. And again, I've supported Apple a lot on this show, in terms of their store, and they should get money for it, and so on and so forth. But I think they're up against the legal system. They're not above the legal system. They can be stubborn. Of course they're going to appeal. But I don't see facts that really are on their side. To make me confident that they're going to have anything other than an expensive, long drawn out appeal process.
Jeff, I want to get you in.
Clearly, what Apple has done looks really bad, and I am personally questioning a lot of the decisions they have made along the way in this case. I don't remember who it was earlier that said they should have listened to Phil Schiller. Yeah, they should have. But the whole thing seems crazy to me. And my feeling is that this falls under Chaffin's razor, meaning Brian Chaffin. So if and that is, if something seems completely illogical, it just doesn't make sense why someone, or in this case, a company, is acting the way they are, then that means there's a critical piece of information we're all missing that would allow this to make sense. So I do think there's something critical that we don't have that would make us all sit back and go, oh, okay, I get what they're doing and why they're doing it. With that said, my hypothesis is that Apple has run all the calculus, and they have some strategy that they feel in the end does let them win, for whatever value of win that is for Apple. So they know what a win is for them, and that's probably what they will get, because they're pretty savvy and they have more money than whatever deity you want to choose. And but still, this is bad optics. But I think it's bad optics right now, at least for the people in the echo chamber. Later on, it may be a bigger deal for average users, but at least for now, I don't think so. But it wouldn't surprise me, though, if Apple is prepared to try and get this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Okay, so let me, I didn't write down everything everybody said, so let me cherry pick just a few things and points to remember. First of all, I want to give credit to Steve in the chat room, because he said the thing people forgot is that the 30% was low at the time. And keep in mind, a minute ago, I said that I posted an article in there that the App Store is 22 years old. Other distributors took more. So Apple set their bar and they want to maintain their bar. Mark, I too read both decisions, and my feeling is that Gonzalez is upset because Apple didn't abide by the spirit of what she wanted. But Apple's not stupid, and neither are their lawyers. And I feel like they went to the 27%. They did that because they felt like they were complying. And we've had this discussion before about Apple and taxes. Apple will pay taxes if they have to, but if they don't have to, they're not going to, just like any of us. And so I think they felt like they complied with enough. Obviously, to Gonzalez's point, she didn't think they did, but there was nothing really out of bounds. Now, the optics part, Jeff, I'm with you on that. This and the vehemence, I forget who said that. The vehemence that I've heard from a number of different commentators and podcasters about this against Apple, it fascinates me because it's just like they are personally insulted that Apple has been taking 30%. And I don't understand that either. Mark, I think you were the one that started out by saying that courts are not supposed to tell businesses how to run their business, but just to do it within the law. And so when does a court have the right to tell somebody how much to charge? I mean, should they be telling Ferrari how much to charge for their cars, or Honda or Ford or Chevy? So I'm a little shaky on that. Jim, you mentioned Fortnite coming back in the App Store. Let's not forget that Fortnite was the one, and we talked about this for at least 2 or 3 shows, who feels like they orchestrated this whole thing because they violated the terms of service that Apple had set up for the App Store, not to 30%, but the other terms of service about the payments. And Apple threw them out. And then they had a coordinated attack, PR attack and legal attack, right ready to go as soon as that happened. So this whole thing was kind of set up by Fortnite. And I just, I look at this and I'm not sure who said it, but Jeff, maybe it was you. I think Apple does believe they'll win. They'll win whatever that means to them. But I think they've rolled over now because they had to, because the judge's order said they had to. But I think they'll fight this as long as they can. And I'm not sure there's anything wrong with that, with trying to maintain what they have and what they've built and the reliability. One last thing, Jim, to your point, there are a lot of weapons that Apple could deploy to people that, didn't want to play by their rules. But I have to wonder if that's an opportunity for them too, to maybe add some value to having things purchased through the App Store instead of going to external payments. Because I can see now where if I buy an app and I go to an external payment, I'm going to have to argue with that external payment, but Apple's going to say, no, sorry, we sold it. We sold it and we're done. So I think there's potentially going to be a harm to the users because Apple's not going to be as service oriented as they were, because now you're no longer their customer in a sense. You're the customer of that payment system, who, by the way, then is going to probably send your information to that developer so they can contact you, whether you want them to or not. And then your name is on an email list, and we're right back to the whole privacy thing. So those are my thoughts on your thoughts. Anybody want to take me on? Please.
Well, I would just point out that again, I think I don't know what's motivating Apple internally. I can speculate, but none of us are sitting in on those rooms. But I do think that it's not a good situation to violate a judge's order. Do I agree with it? No, I don't. I think Apple should have come out and they should have provided justification for their fees and charges. There was a lot of discussion at the original trial about that. Now I think that's the thing that got under their skin. And we may get into another thing, but Sweeney was talking about the Epic App Store. They only charge 12%. So this is reminding me of that old, Winston Churchill thing where he says, "Lady Astor, would you sleep with me?" And she says, "No, Winston, you're repulsive." And Lady Astor, "Would you sleep with me for £1 million?" "Why, yes, Lord Churchill, I would." He says, "Now that we've established what you are, we just need to negotiate a proper price." So I think that's the whole thing about Apple is I remember when the coverage came out, a couple of years ago, they say, "Oh well, Epic lost and all these other things that Apple can still charge for their App Store." Well, I didn't read the decision back then, but basically they needed to come back with some sort of justification or modified fee. They did not do it, and that's why they're subject to the legal peril now. I think that on appeal, I think again, it's who says it's who the hell says it's too expensive, and who the hell says it's really 30% when a lot of stuff is 15%. I know this is a lot of true for software. I'm not quite sure what the rules are, and as much as I searched around, I couldn't find the rules for content and in-app subscriptions for existing apps. So a lot of that is, from my viewpoint, is shrouded in mystery. But I think the most important thing is, at one level, the reputational damage to Apple, I think, is immense. And the people on this show and in this audience, probably won't change their behavior, but a lot of people in switching. And just imagine, if the court, if the case goes to court of, Apple Finance VP, lied, perjured himself, to protect, App Store margins, how the hell is that going to look? So, it's maybe at the end of things, this may not, be a huge financial, hit to Apple, which Jim speculated, which I disagree with. I think they're going to have, they're going to have a hit. I don't know if it's big enough to call it, what more to say than that. But I think their reputational damage is really, 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 horrible.
I want to make sure we get the chat room in here. Excuse me. Barry asked, didn't the Supreme Court already refuse to hear this? I don't have an answer to that.
Yes,
I
they
don't
did.
know. They did?
They did.
Okay.
They
So,
did. But that was in a prior life. It has evolved and mutated since then.
okay. So then they would have a shot at going back up that path.
Yeah.
Steve,
Chuck, it'd be more accurate to say, no, the Supreme Court has not refused to hear this. They refused to hear arguments earlier in this process.
I
Okay.
think they refused to hear an appeal from Epic. So now it would be Apple appealing a completely different issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Steve in the chat room says it's likely that the vast majority of people will still use the Apple payment system because it's built in and easiest to use. However, however, Apple wants to make as much money as they can, just like every business, just like every person. And I'm right there with you, Steve. They're going to try to maintain as much of their profit margin as they possibly can, as they should. Because they have to do the metrics between, okay, when do we hit diminishing returns, or have we already hit them? And I go back to Steve's earlier comment: 30% was low when this started. Other distributors were taking more.
That's
so
cool.
I'm going by what Steve says, but I think I do recall that at the time there were software, not phone software, Jim. I think I don't know what the actual margins were for some others, but
I've been selling software for 40 years. There's never been anywhere near 30% difference between what I sold the software for and what the consumer paid, at least not on a widespread amount. Because, there was this fiction of a high margin, but there was always this street price. Nobody sold software for a list price. So, the margin between what software was sold for to a distributor and what the consumer paid was more like 8 to 10%.
And Jim, I have to ask,
And the other thing is, your question is, how does the government get to, what do they have to say about it? Well, the question is it a monopoly? We decided 125 years ago that if a business has a monopoly, then the government has a right to have a say in that. So, we can agree or disagree on whether Apple has a monopoly. It's not for you or me, it's for a court. But, businesses that have monopolies are not allowed to do whatever they want.
Okay. Marty, Eric, Dave, anybody have anything? Jeff, anybody have anything? Again, I don't want to take up the whole show on this because we're going to be talking about this for weeks, if not longer.
Well,
on
I can
and off.
load it up in Dylan. The times are changing.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.